The story of the first murder is told in every Abrahamic tradition. But what if I told you the untold trigger behind Qabil's jealousy wasn't just sacrifice, but Habil's wife? A truth so controversial that most scholars avoid it. Today, we uncover the forgotten narrative, blending Qur'an, Torah, apocryphal writings, and psychology to reveal what really ignited humanity's first crime. According to early Islamic narrations, Adam and Hawa's children were born in pairs, a boy and a girl together. Yet divine law forbade twins from marrying each other. Instead, cross-marriage was required, the son of one set with the daughter of another. This law was not merely biological, ensuring genetic diversity in the earliest human generations, but also spiritual, reminding humanity from its first breath that love and marriage must be guided by divine order, not unrestrained desire. Qabil, Cain, was born with his twin sister Aklima, famed for her beauty. Habil, Abel, was born alongside Labuda, described as less beautiful. By divine command, Habil was destined for Aklima, while Qabil was assigned Labuda. But Qabil resisted. He wanted his own twin, the one forbidden to him. In that refusal, the seed of jealousy sprouted, a desire strong enough to challenge God himself. Qabil's rebellion against divine order. Qabil's refusal to accept the divine decree marked a critical turning point in humanity's story. While Habil submitted without protest, trusting that divine wisdom was greater than personal preference, Qabil could not. His heart was restless, consumed by desire for his twin sister Aklima. To him, the rule of cross-marriage felt unjust, even humiliating. Why should he, the elder brother, be denied what his eyes longed for? Here lies a profound lesson about the ego, or nafs. When desire meets divine restriction, the ego often rebels. Qabil's obsession with Aklima was not just attraction, it was entitlement. He convinced himself that he deserved her, even if it meant rejecting God's command. This rebellion wasn't just personal, it was archetypal. Across all ages, human beings wrestle with the same impulse, the clash between divine guidance and the demands of desire. Islamic scholars like Ibn Kathir preserve this narration, warning that unchecked desire blinds the heart. Modern psychology agrees. Entitlement and comparison fuel envy and aggression. Carl Jung might call it the shadow, the unacknowledged darkness that, if ignored, begins to control us. And so, jealousy began its work, festering in Qabil, preparing the ground for tragedy. The first test: sacrifices before Allah. To settle the conflict between the brothers, Allah commanded them to offer sacrifices. This would serve as a divine judgment, whose offering would be accepted and whose rejected. It was a test of sincerity, not wealth. Habil, a shepherd by trade, selected the finest of his flock. With humility and pure intention, he laid his sacrifice before God, confident not in its material worth, but in the sincerity of his heart. Qabil, however, approached the test with bitterness. Instead of choosing the best of his harvest, he gathered spoiled and inferior crops, offering them reluctantly. His body performed the ritual, but his heart was absent. The Qur'an records this moment with striking clarity, 5:27. Indeed, Allah only accepts from the righteous. And so it happened. A fire descended from heaven, consuming Habil's sacrifice, leaving Qabil's untouched. The sign was unmistakable. God had accepted the offering of sincerity and rejected the one made without faith. This was more than a ritual. It was the unveiling of inner states. As Stanford Research 2017 on costly signaling shows, true sacrifice proves commitment. Habil's sincerity shone, Qabil's resentment deepened. Jealousy was no longer a spark, it became a consuming fire. Divine sign of acceptance. Fire consumes Habil's offering. The moment of divine judgment was dramatic. A heavenly fire descended, consuming Habil's offering in front of all who witnessed, leaving Qabil's untouched on the ground. In the ancient world, fire symbolized purity, divine acceptance, and transformation. It was the ultimate sign that Allah had looked into their hearts and found Habil's intention pure, while Qabil's was tainted by arrogance and resentment. For Habil, this was confirmation of his faith, that God sees not the size of the offering, but the sincerity behind it. For Qabil, however, it was humiliation. His pride could not bear the sight of rejection, especially in front of his family. In his mind, the divine sign was not a lesson, but an insult. Psychology helps us decode this reaction. Studies on social comparison reveal that rejection in competitive settings triggers intense envy and aggression. Instead of learning humility, Qabil's ego burned hotter than the fire that consumed Habil's sacrifice. His sense of worth became entangled with resentment, a dangerous mix. Like Commodus in Gladiator, who envied Maximus's honor, Qabil's identity fractured under rejection. Rather than turning inward for growth, he turned outward in rage. The seed of violence had now fully germinated. Jealousy as a spiritual virus. The nafs unchecked. With the fire's judgment still fresh, Qabil's heart hardened. What began as disappointment turned into envy, and envy quickly fermented into hatred. The Qur'an reveals that jealousy, hasad, is among the most destructive forces of the soul, a poison that consumes the envier before it harms the envied. Qabil could not rejoice in his brother's acceptance. Instead, he saw Habil's success as his own humiliation. Psychology affirms this truth. Smith and Kim's 2007 study on envy describes how it drives aggressive impulses when self-worth feels threatened. Qabil's inner dialogue became toxic. Why him and not me? Why should my brother have what I desire? This distorted thinking blinded him from self-reflection. Instead of seeing Habil's sincerity as something to learn from, he saw it as something to destroy. Mystic poets like Rumi warned of this spiritual virus. Jealousy is the mother of blood. Left unchecked, envy infects the nafs, ego, making the soul restless, insatiable, and violent. In Jungian terms, Qabil's shadow self, the hidden darkness of desire and rage, was now in control. The story here is timeless. Whenever envy rules, love dies. And in Qabil's case, brotherhood itself was about to be extinguished. The confrontation, Habil's refusal to retaliate. Consumed by rage, Qabil confronted his brother. He no longer hid his jealousy. He spoke openly of his intent to kill. But Habil's response was startling, almost disarming in its gentleness. The Qur'an, 5:28, records his words, "If you stretch your hand against me to kill me, I shall not stretch out my hand against you to kill you. Indeed, I fear Allah, the Lord of all worlds." This was not weakness. It was a profound display of taqwa, God consciousness. Habil understood that the act of taking life was not just a crime against his brother, but against the Creator himself. He chose non-retaliation, entrusting his safety to divine justice. His refusal revealed a deep principle. Sometimes the greatest strength is restraint, not reaction. History echoes this truth. In Gandhi, 1982, nonviolence is portrayed not as passivity, but as moral power, the ability to absorb aggression without perpetuating the cycle. Psychologists today call this self-regulation, the conscious refusal to let anger dictate behavior. Habil's words were a last chance for Qabil to stop, to reflect, to turn back from the edge. But the poison of jealousy had already eclipsed his reason. The confrontation was over. And violence was inevitable. The first murder. Blood on the earth. The moment came when jealousy could no longer be contained. Qabil, driven by envy and blinded by anger, struck his brother Habil. Traditions describe him seizing a stone, and in some narrations, the jawbone of a donkey, primitive weapons that carried the weight of humanity's first violence. With that act, the earth drank the first human blood. This was not just fratricide, it was the introduction of death by human hands into history. Until then, death had been part of nature's rhythm, but never caused by one sibling against another. Qabil's act shattered innocence and revealed what happens when ego overrides divine command. The Qur'an portrays this moment with brevity, but its implications echo endlessly. Envy unchecked leads to destruction, and once blood is shed, the world is never the same. Psychologists speak of moral disengagement, the ability to silence conscience long enough to commit violence. Qabil silenced his, but the silence would not last. Symbolically, this moment is the archetypal shadow erupting into action. Like Cain in the biblical narrative, Qabil became a wanderer not only of the earth but of his own conscience, forever marked by the weight of his crime. The crow's lesson: divine symbolism of accountability. After the murder, Qabil stood over his brother's lifeless body, paralyzed by shock. The weight of his action dawned on him, but he did not know what to do next. Death until then had been an unfamiliar reality. How does one lay to rest what was once alive, breathing, and beloved? It was then that Allah sent a crow. Qabil watched as the bird scratched at the earth, digging a hole to bury another dead crow. In this simple act of nature, divine wisdom spoke. The Qur'an, 531, records Qabil's anguished realization. Woe to me! Am I not even able to be like this crow, to hide the disgrace of my brother? The crow became a teacher, showing humanity the first ritual of burial, but also a mirror of Qabil's shame. Even creation itself seemed wiser, more obedient, than the man who had let envy destroy him. Psychologically, this moment illustrates what modern researchers call moral injury, the profound guilt and disorientation that follow acts against conscience. Qabil's punishment began not with exile, but with inner torment. He buried his brother's body, but he could not bury the gnawing weight of regret. The weight of regret. Inner punishment beyond exile. After the burial, silence surrounded Qabil, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of guilt. He had acted on envy, killed his own brother, and now stood alone with the consequences. The Qur'an says he became one of the regretful, 531. Yet regret is not the same as repentance. His heart carried shame, but he hadn't yet sought forgiveness. This is the essence of nafs al-lawama, the self-reproaching soul, as described in Islamic psychology. It is the stage where conscience awakens after wrongdoing, but the pain can either guide toward repentance or deepen despair. Qabil's burden became his exile. Though no physical prison bound him, he was condemned to wander the earth, estranged from family, estranged from God, estranged from himself. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Perpetrators of violence often live with post-traumatic guilt, unable to reconcile their act with their sense of identity. Jung would call it shadow possession, when the darkness you refuse to confront takes over and leaves you fractured. Qabil's true punishment was not death, but life with the unbearable memory of his crime. He had buried his brother, but the soil of his soul remained restless. Encountering light and spiritual guides. Though Qabil's story is marked by regret, Islamic tradition reminds us that divine mercy always leaves a door open. After his crime, Qabil's soul was shaken, burdened by guilt, yet not beyond the reach of guidance. Narrations suggest that Allah, in His wisdom, sent lessons through creation and even spiritual signs to remind Qabil that repentance was possible. Where jealousy had blinded him to truth, now guilt made him sensitive to glimpses of light. This stage reflects a universal pattern in spiritual growth. When darkness overwhelms, the soul often begins to see light more clearly. In Sufi writings, guides appear in many forms: a bird, a dream, or a teacher, to gently redirect a lost heart. Similarly, Carl Jung noted that archetypal guides often emerge in the unconscious during moments of inner crisis, leading individuals toward integration rather than despair. Psychology confirms this through studies on post-traumatic growth. Individuals, even after committing or witnessing deep wrongs, can undergo transformation when they surrender to humility and seek higher meaning. For Qabil, the crow was just the beginning. It symbolized that divine guidance remains patient, always inviting, never forcing. Even in guilt, light beckoned, urging the soul to rise again. Life as a classroom and the role of unfinished lessons. The story of Qabil and Habil is not preserved in the Qur'an merely as history. It is a classroom for the soul. Each detail, from desire, jealousy, sacrifice, to regret, is a curriculum designed for reflection. Just as Habil embodied taqwa, God consciousness, Qabil embodied the danger of unchecked ego. Their story lives on to teach us what happens when the nafs governs without guidance. Life itself in Islamic thought is a temporary arena for such lessons. We are tested not to be humiliated, but to grow. Even mistakes and failures, like Qabil's crime, carry seeds of wisdom if we face them honestly. This resonates with Carl Jung's principle of individuation. True growth comes not from perfection, but from integrating our shadow, acknowledging the darker parts of ourselves and learning from them. Modern research on resilience echoes this. Psychologists Tedeschi and Calhoun, 2004, showed that trauma can catalyze post-traumatic growth, fostering deeper appreciation of life, spiritual maturity, and compassion for others. In other words, the classroom of suffering can create wisdom unavailable through ease. Qabil's tragedy is not only his crime, but his failure to learn. The unfinished lesson remains timeless. Without self-awareness and humility, the same cycle repeats across generations. Free will, karma, and spiritual growth through service. The story of Qabil and Habil reminds us that even in moments of darkness, free will remains at the heart of human destiny. Qabil was not forced to envy, not forced to kill. He chose. This principle is echoed across traditions. The Qur'an emphasizes that we guided him to the two paths, 90-10, meaning each soul stands daily at a crossroads. While Islam does not frame karma in the Hindu or Buddhist sense, the principle of consequences is universal. Every action plants a seed that will inevitably bear fruit. Qabil's act sowed grief, regret, and estrangement. Habil's act of taqwa sowed remembrance and eternal honor. In both cases, the seeds extended beyond their lives, shaping the moral imagination of humanity itself. Modern behavioral science confirms this law of consequence. Studies in moral psychology show that small acts of kindness ripple outward, creating measurable increases in social trust and cooperation, while aggression spreads fear and cycles of violence. Carl Jung described this truth symbolically. You are not what happens to you, but what you choose to become. Service to others, even in small ways, aligns us with divine purpose and breaks the cycle of ego-driven destruction.